live in two worlds. Two worlds. My world and this other world. There's always two. There's an X and a Y. There's a husband and a wife. Or whatever it is, it's always two. I live in two worlds. And I'm not going to share three things with you. I'm going to share two things with you. Two things. There's always a yes or a no. So these two things are so important to me that I want you to understand that I live in two worlds. I'll tell you about my world, and then I'll tell you about this other world. My world is living in a privileged household with a mom, a dad, a brother with a master's. And then there's this other world. It's not too far. In fact, it's only 10 minutes from where we are right now. I live in Sugar Land, and this other world is in Houston. And I pass this world all the time. I'm driving on the freeway with my parents, or I'm just driving on my own, and I see this other world. And I usually take a left, but the other world is on the right. The left is Hillcroft. There's an Indian bazaar, there's amazing food, and I love all of it. But then there's the world on the right that people usually don't see. It's the world that's usually neglected. And this world is where 3,000 refugees live. The street's called Rookin', and it's right off of Highway 59. And I'll tell you what this world is like, but I'll tell you about my world first. My world is me living in a house with air conditioning, with heating, with a trampoline in the backyard. But this other world is playing on the streets where there's a lot of traffic. This other world has prostitutes on the streets. This other world has drug deals going on while the kids are going to school. This other world is not my world. But I do have a large interest in this world. This other world has a father who works in a chicken factory in Waco, comes home on the weekends. And then there's the mother who does handicraft. And that's the only way the family survives. But that's not my world. I'm interested in this world. So talking about two different worlds, there's another thing that has two in it. And that thing is schooling and education. There's two different worlds. I went to Clements High School, but I didn't go to the Clements Education Center. I'll tell you what school does. Schools produce grades, they have GPAs, they have ranks. But what does education produce? Education produces impact. It creates leaders for the future. They're two separate worlds. And as I said before, this number two is just so important. Going to Clements High School made me a good student. But did it really make me a good leader? I'm not really sure. But living in two separate worlds is so important, and to understand two things that education can really do. There's only two, and I'm going to talk about both of them. There's awareness, and then there's action. Those are the two things that bring the two worlds together. Awareness and action. I told you I went to this neighborhood. I would have never even realized that this neighborhood existed if I wasn't aware about what was going on. There were the prostitutes, there were the drug dealers, and this was a special neighborhood, and I really didn't know that it existed. Now I was aware. I had this empirical understanding of what existed in the world. It wasn't this privileged life that everyone had. Everyone didn't have a mom and a dad and a brother. Everyone didn't have a trampoline in the backyard. But this was this separate world that I needed to know about. I had to become aware of what was going on. And no one was going to do it for me. It had to be a self-directed process of learning, of having empirical understandings of what was going on in this world to understand that two separate worlds existed. So the first point is awareness. Understanding that two separate worlds exist. And then your job, my job, is to live in both the worlds, understand what happens in both these locations. And then the second part, as I said, is awareness and action. So action is having this empirical understanding of what goes on in the world, taking normative data. So if you read a research paper, read a book, you go into the field, see what's going on, and taking that in and turning that awareness into action. That's what real education is. School can't change awareness into action, but education can. And I'm here to share with you what I learned from these two separate worlds that I live in. That most definitely we need education. We don't need school. But how do you bridge the gap between awareness and action? And the answer is, what I found was through discussion, through dialogue. And what I created was the Global Issues Summit. The Global Issues Summit was much like a TED Talk. It happened in April 2013, and I brought speakers from 13 different areas of human rights, humanitarian awareness. And my job, my task, was to turn awareness into action. To teach people that schooling is not going to solve our world's crises, but education might. Education will, and education does do that. So these speakers came in to talk about what they are doing in the field. I had a speaker come talk about human trafficking and how it existed in our neighborhoods. It existed in that neighborhood that I talked to you about off of Hillcroft. Human trafficking existed. The person had an awareness about an issue, they knew what was going on, and they were sharing their action. And my job was to share their actions with other people. As I said before, there's two things that we need to know. If we live in two worlds, and there's an X and a Y, there's a yes and a no, but there's two things that can change our world forever. Not three ideas, but just two. We need to turn awareness into action. Thank you.